26 low-skilled job categories to be added to the labour importation scheme. High Court Judge Wilson Chan accused of judicial copying again. And in Nottingham in the UK, a man arrested in a series of stabbing and van attack incidents. Welcome to TVB News. The government announced yesterday it plans to refine the current supplementary labour scheme by allowing employers of 26 low-skilled job categories to import labour. While business sectors welcomed the change, some labour representatives expressed concern that employment opportunities for locals will be affected. Mimosa Ngai reports.
At a press conference yesterday, the government announced major changes to the supplementary labour scheme. 26 low-skilled categories from the scheme that have been generally excluded from importing labour, such as cashiers and sales assistants, will be allowed to import workers for 2 years. The government also plans to shorten the approval time for each application, aiming to reducing it from the previous 5 months to within 3 months. A member of the Labour Advisory Board, Lam Wai Gong, said such a refinement shows the government only wants to speed up the number of workers coming to Hong Kong instead of hoping to enhance the scheme. Under the changes, employers must first still try recruiting local employees for at least a month before being allowed to apply for the scheme. Speaking after a radio program, Secretary for Labour Chris Sun says each application will be assessed strictly.
We allow employers to make an application, but for each and every application, they have to, first of all, to prove there is a shortage in recruiting from local. So it's not for sure that the application will be processed.
Meanwhile, the Hong Kong Hotels Association said it welcomes the decision to import labour, with around 9,000 vacancies in the industry. However, some union representatives, including lawmaker Lam Zhengsheng, who is also chairman of the Federation of Hong Kong and Kowloon Labour Unions, are worried that the policy will affect job opportunities for local graduates. Mimosa Ngai, TVB News.
The government announced there will be 20,000 imported workers for the construction, aviation and transport sectors. More than 80 government construction projects qualify for the scheme, but allocation of imported workers will be based on the severity of labour shortage rather than on a first-come, first-served basis. Deputy Financial Secretary Michael Wong said today, while the special labour importation scheme is not permanent, it will be needed in the coming few years. He said how long the plan will last depends on the economic situation and the effects on the sectors. As for whether the scheme can attract workers from outside the territory, Wong expressed his confidence, saying Hong Kong offers much higher wages than the mainland. High Court Judge Wilson Chan recently received a reprimand from the city's Chief Justice for judicial copying while handing down a judgment in a civil case. Chan has now been accused of copying a written submission in his judgment again in another lawsuit.
The case in question was a legal challenge involving the heirs of the founder of Great Eagle Holdings. The Court of Appeal noted in Wilson Chan's judgment that he extensively repeated the words from the submission of the defense, thus questioned whether the judge had exercised independent thinking. Vice President of the Court of Appeal of the High Court, Susan Kwan, noted the court just finished handling another case in which Wilson Chan had copied from a written submission. That case involved an appeal filed by the Singapore Medicine Company Limited. It noted in 2021, Judge Wilson Chan ruled that the company had infringed the trademark of Wong To Yik Woodlock ointment. But the judgment was almost identical to the written submission of the plaintiff, and Chan's actions was considered judicial copying. Senior counsel Ronnie Tong thinks the main problem here is that the judge has not listed out arguments from both parties.
The problem is not in the cut and pasting part. The problem is in the judge giving people the impression that he doesn't quite understand the party submissions, and he only chooses to rely on the arguments of one party and not the other. And that directly affects people's trust and respect for our judicial system.
Tong believes this incident would serve as a reminder to other judges in town. Sharon Tang, TVB News.
Foreign Minister Qin Gang has urged the United States to respect Beijing's position on the Taiwan question and stop harming its security. This comes in a phone call with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken ahead of the top American diplomat's expected visit to Beijing. Qin told Blinken to respect China's core concerns, such as the Taiwan issue. Qin said, since the beginning of the year, Sino-U.S. relations have encountered new difficulties and challenges, and the responsibility is clear. He added the United States should stop interfering in China's internal affairs and stop harming China's sovereignty, security, and development interests in the name of competition. Blinken stressed the need for communication to avoid miscalculation and conflict. He said the U.S. would continue to raise areas of concern as well as potential cooperation with China. A U.S. official said last week Blinken would be in Beijing this Sunday, but there's been no word from the Chinese Foreign Ministry about the visit. The U.S. State Department has amended part of a statement to Congress in which it said Washington would invite Chief Executive John Lee to the APEC summit in November. San Francisco is set to host this year's meeting of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Group, of which Hong Kong is a member economy. John Lee came under U.S. sanctions in 2020 because of the Hong Kong national security law. 4 U.S. lawmakers last week sent a letter to the State Department urging it to bar Lee from the country. This after U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman said in a statement to Congress that Washington intended to welcome Lee. A State Department spokesperson later said an incorrect version of this answer was inadvertently transmitted to Congress, and the department regrets the error. The official added no decisions about invitations have been made. The Chinese Foreign Ministry has urged the U.S. to ensure smooth participation of all APEC members. UK police are questioning a man on suspicion of murder as they seek the motive for a stabbing and van attack in the central English city of Nottingham. The attack on Tuesday has left 3 people dead and another in critical condition. Dan Orell tells us more.
2 19-year-olds, a man and a woman who were students at Nottingham University, were found dead on a city centre street with stab wounds after police were alerted at about 4 a.m. on Tuesday. Another 50-year-old man was later found dead with knife wounds on a road about 2 miles away. A van believed to have been stolen from the 50-year-old victim was then driven at 3 people, leaving 1 critically injured in hospital. After the vehicle was stopped, police used a stun gun to arrest a 31-year-old man and said they are not looking for any other suspects. British media said one of the 2 teenage victims, named as Grace Kumar, had played hockey for England's under-18 team. The other victim, Barnaby Webber, was said to be a keen cricket player. The BBC reported that the suspect was believed to be a migrant of West African origin with a history of mental health issues. Counter-terrorism officers are helping Nottinghamshire's police force with the investigation into the attack.
We are still in the early stages of the investigation and need to determine exactly what the motives were behind this attack.
British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak called the incident shocking and said the police must be given the time to undertake their work. Home Secretary Suella Braverman expressed her condolences with the families and friends of the 3 victims.
My thoughts, first and foremost, are with all of those who have been involved, their friends, their families, and their communities.
The incident has shocked the city, particularly the student community. Nottingham is home to 2 universities with more than 50,000 students. A Nottingham University graduation ball scheduled for Tuesday evening was cancelled. Many students gathered instead to light candles for the victims during a church vigil. Dan Orell, TV News.
Japanese police arrested an 18-year-old soldier this morning after he shot and killed 3 people at a military firing range in central Japan. The 3 who died were all shooting instructors. Local media said 1 man was in his 50s and 2 in their 20s. It was the first such fatal shooting at a ground self-defense force firing range since 1984. The assailant had just joined the service in April. Shootings are extremely rare in Japan, where gun ownership is tightly regulated. Last July, former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe was shot and killed by someone wielding a homemade gun. Still ahead on tonight's news. Donald Trump pleads not guilty to 37 counts of federal charges. Locally, customs officers arrest 23 men on suspicion of money laundering involving $720 million. And a look at this year's International Travel Expo. Welcome back to TVB News. Former U.S. President Donald Trump pleaded not guilty in a Miami court Tuesday to 37 federal charges that he unlawfully kept national security documents after leaving office and that he lied to officials who sought to recover them. Trump's plea sets up a legal battle likely to play out while he campaigns to win back the presidency in 2024. Experts say it could be a year before a trial takes place. Tracy Furness has more.
Trump left his Doral resort in Miami on Tuesday, heading to a history-making federal court appearance. He is the first former president of the United States to face federal criminal charges. Trump approached his arraignment with characteristic bravado, posting on social media broadsides against the prosecution from inside his motorcade en route to the courthouse. As the 4 black SUVs arrived, Trump surrendered to authorities ahead of his scheduled 3 p.m. court appearance. Security was tight outside the courthouse, but there was no sign of serious disruption. USA! USA! Trump had called on supporters to support him outside the court, but the number of supporters and opponents that showed up were outstripped by the number of journalists coming from as far as China, Switzerland and New Zealand. Inside the courtroom, Trump sat silently scowling and arms crossed as a lawyer entered a not guilty plea on his behalf. But the gravity of the moment was unmistakable as he answered to 37 counts that accused him of willfully retaining classified records that prosecutors say could have jeopardized national security. The brief arraignment ended without him having to surrender his passport or restrict his travel, and no cash bond was required. After leaving the court, an upbeat Trump visited a restaurant in Miami, greeting Cuban exiles who had gathered there.
I think it's going great. Okay, I think it's a rigged deal here. We have a rigged country. We have a country that's corrupt.
After leaving Miami, Trump flew to Bedminster, New Jersey, where he aired his grievances again.
The prosecutor in the case, I will call it our case, is a thug. I've named him Deranged Jack Smith. They want to take away my freedom because I will never let them take away your freedom. It's very simple. They want to silence me because I will never let them silence you.
Analysts say, in theory, Trump can be under federal indictment and even be convicted and in federal prison and still be president of the United States. There is nothing that prohibits a convicted felon from holding public office. Tracy Furness, TVB News.
Russian President Vladimir Putin told journalists and military bloggers that Ukraine is suffering heavy losses in its failing counteroffensive. Putin said Kyiv has lost many of the main battle tanks and fighting vehicles provided by its Western allies. Ukraine, meanwhile, said they are making steady progress in the eastern regions after launching their push to retake territory. Nasvi Karim has details.
The Bradleys and the Leopards are burning really well, says Russian President Vladimir Putin. Putin was, of course, referring to the much-hyped American Bradley fighting vehicles and German Leopard 2 tanks sent to Ukraine to help launch a counteroffensive against Russia. Smiling and joking with military journalists and bloggers in Moscow, Putin mocked Kyiv's long-awaited push, saying Ukraine has suffered catastrophic losses, including up to 30% of the military vehicles and tanks supplied by its Western allies. The Russian leader said Ukraine began its counteroffensive on June 4th and has lost 10 times more soldiers than Russia. He even suggested that Moscow could launch its own offensive in another attempt to capture Kyiv, after failing to do so in March last year. Putin mobilized 300,000 soldiers last year as Ukraine made significant gains in the eastern region. He said Russia has enough recruits to fight against Ukraine, though he did not rule out another conscription drive. Putin also talked peace, but said he would only sit at the table if the West stopped supplying Kyiv with weapons. Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky has yet to respond to Putin's remarks, only decrying Moscow's deadly attacks on his hometown of Kryvyi Rih. He said the weapons that killed almost a dozen people contained Western-made components and called for a crackdown on Moscow's evasion of sanctions. Kyiv, meanwhile, claimed to have retaken a number of villages in the eastern front lines, including Neskhuchne in Donetsk. It is one of several small gains Ukraine has made since launching a drive to push Russian troops out of 4 regions in the east and the Crimean Peninsula. In Washington, US President Joe Biden met NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, with both men hailing the Ukrainian counteroffensive.
The support that we are providing together to Ukraine is now making a difference on the battlefield as we speak.
Nazri Karim, TVB News.
Back locally, the Customs has arrested 23 local men for alleged money laundering. The syndicate was suspected of arranging members to bring large amounts of cash as air passengers from overseas into Hong Kong. The suspected crime proceeds amounted to about 720 million Hong Kong dollars. Customs said the men had been traveling frequently between Hong Kong and Turkey from January to May this year. They would declare a large amount of US dollar banknotes, claiming the money would be used for the jewelry trade. An investigation found that the cash would later be handed over to other syndicate members to take to Tsim Sha Tsui. The 23 people arrested have been released on bail pending further investigation. This year's International Travel Expo has returned with a scale more than double from last year. The 4-day fair will feature over 400 exhibitors from some 50 countries and regions at the Hong Kong Convention and Exhibition Centre. Jacqueline previewed the event.
It's the first International Travel Expo in Hong Kong, held post-pandemic. With a pent-up demand for travel set to help buoy interest in the expo, its organizer expects more than 60,000 visitors will attend their 4-day fair. That's 3 times last year's number.
Comparatively speaking, the Asia economy performed better than many parts of the world. And, then people here more likely can afford traveling. Many have not been traveling for 3 years or more. They are prepared to spend more.
This time, more than 20 exhibitors hail from one of Hong Kongers' favorite travel destinations, Japan. They include Tochigi and Ibaraki prefectures, which are located just next to Fukushima. On whether the release of treated nuclear wastewater to the sea would impinge on tourism from Hong Kong, the exhibitors have this to say.
Ibaraki welcomes Hong Kong people without worrying about radiation, because the government is working hard to protect all the people.
To be honest, we still don't really have any so-called solution or maybe any promotion to attract more Hong Kong visitors to go to Japan or maybe to go to the Tochigi prefecture because of the radiation, the water. But we do have some comments which they really want to visit the Tochigi during summer or autumn.
Prefecture representatives from both Ibaraki and Tochigi told us they expect there will be 5 to 10% more tourists from Hong Kong than pre-pandemic levels. This as they saw more Hong Kongers get interested in their self-driving tours and their flower parks right behind me. On the first day of the fair on Thursday, only registered visitors with business cards will be admitted. Starting Friday at 2 p.m., the expo will be open to the public. Jackie Lin, TVB News.
For a smart city like Hong Kong, cooking is becoming smarter and greener too. At the Smart Catering Fair, which started yesterday, CLP said it hoped to provide a platform for the catering sector to achieve low carbon emissions in post-pandemic Hong Kong. Among the 24 exhibitors, one plans to launch an automatic stir-frying machine by the end of this year. Mimo Sengai was at the fair.
Pork and spring onions. While the ingredients are common, the dish is not cooked in an ordinary way, not by a common chef. Rather, the chef is this automatic stir-frying machine introduced by a startup tech company. After 5 to 7 minutes, the dish is ready. The CEO of the company, Kim Lam, said the pandemic inspired him to launch the tech catering machine for the Hong Kong market. He said the pandemic not only had affected businesses in the catering sector, but it had also changed eating habits. This inspired Lam to provide people with hot and freshly made meals without the need to go outside or order takeaways, helpful for employees with short lunch hours. A CLP spokesperson hopes the fair can encourage people to apply innovative and energy-saving solutions.
We think obviously there is a lot of opportunities to making use of a new obviously technology to supporting our customer, especially obviously for catering. As you can see, during obviously pandemic, there is a lot of the change in the catering of the industry, and they are applying the innovative solutions, such as using the robotics solutions to deliver the meal obviously to a customer.
Wong added the power company will continue to promote green catering in the future to help the city achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. Mimosanai, TVB News.
A last Beatles song featuring the voice of late member John Lennon will be released this year thanks to artificial intelligence, Paul McCartney told the BBC on Tuesday. McCartney did not name the track, but said the technology was used on a demo that John had that we worked on. McCartney said, "When we came to make what will be the last Beatles record, we were able to take John's voice and get it pure through this AI so that we could then mix the record as you would normally do." He also said that director Peter Jackson had used the technology for the 2021 documentary series, The Beatles Get Back. That's the news. Thanks for watching.